At number 10 is Despero. Although Despero has always been totally jacked, he was originally known as more of a threat to the Justice League through mind manipulation. During the Silver Age, he would only typically use his telepathic powers before anything else, but these days, it's a different story. Although these changes did start to take place way back in the 80s, the character has come a long way since the days when he would sit on his throne and twiddle his fingers most of the time. Now, he seems to do a lot of the grunt work himself, even looking larger in size these days than ever before. And even outside of the comics, Despero's appearance in the Arrowverse offers a totally different look into the villain. He takes on a human form for much of the time, who is, well, let's just say he's not as big as Despero, nor does he have much musculature to him, no offense to that actor. Nor does he have a third eye or anything that a comic book fan would expect, and when he's in proper form, he just seems a lot less demonic and cunning, more like Hellboy's very serious detective older brother or something like that. At number 9 we have Anton Arcane. The penultimate villain to Swamp Thing, Anton Arcane has always been a threat as one of the most prolific evil scientists in all of DC. But when Swamp Thing finally kills Anton during one of their many confrontations, back in 2016 I think, the villain goes to hell and basically becomes a demon. Having been a pretty tame foe for most of the Swamp Thing comics, Anton Arcane's physical changes have made him almost unrecognizable now that he's a demon. And what's worse is that he continues to bother Swamp Thing and his niece Abigail, but now with the added demonic powers in mind. So he's changed quite a bit, both in looks and power set. At number 8 we have Psycho Pirate. The way that this villain has changed since the Infinite Crisis event is unmatched. Although he looks relatively the same, he's gained such a power boost that he now works with the likes of Darkseid and Alexander Luthor. After surviving the crisis, he comes out on top, getting his hands on what's known as the Medusa Mask. And what this helps him do is basically summon beings from the old multiverse, which, as you can imagine, is a very powerful ability, especially directly following the event itself. And even though he's been killed by Black Adam during the events of Blackest Night, Psycho Pirate's corpse is brought back to life as a Black Lantern. And as you can imagine, this gives him a whole new look and increases his power level. He loses the Medusa Mask in this ghoulish form, but even without it, he appears totally different than how we're used to seeing him. At number 7 we have Doomsday. The primary change with Doomsday isn't something that's been gained, but something that's been lost. A very notable power of his actually, and that is his hyper adaptability ability. In fact, I would even argue that this was his main power, and what it meant was he could learn from past losses in battle and change his physiology to prevent himself from being killed in the same way twice. I don't know why this has been dropped, because aside from it being the defining characteristic of Doomsday, it was just a really fun ability to watch because it made every encounter with the villain a new challenge for the heroes, which would ultimately make for an exciting read. But for whatever reason, this power has basically been left in the dust, making Doomsday that much less unique from any other Bruiser type villain, at least in my opinion. At number 6 we have Dr. Octopus. Something that the less avid readers may not know about this villain is that he's been going back and forth between heroism and villainy for some time now. And not only that, Otto Octavius has recently taken on the mantle of Spider-Man, donning the superior Spider-Man armor outfitted with the mechanical arms and everything. He's also been taken over by Venom recently, as well as the Carnage symbiote. Although he's known to be back to his evil ways and his classic suit in 2022, there is no telling if he'll jump back into the Spidey suit once more. He's already gone back and forth a number of times, even in the last few years, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did it again.
Number 5. Snag Eye. This robotic general was created to serve the Void Queen during the second season of Dino Fury. He pledged his eternal loyalty to his queen, who demanded that he destroy the Rangers. He was given data on the Dino Fury Rangers' powers, which allowed him to easily defeat the 6 Rangers. The chessboard buckle on his torso contains a pocket dimension, which he was able to use to imprison his foes. It was only through the betrayal of the Void Knight that the Rangers were able to escape the pocket dimension. He then went up against the Red Ranger, who managed to destroy this robot bishop general using the Dino Knight strike. So, though he was only in one episode, the fact that he was able to absolutely wipe the floor with the Rangers is pretty impressive. Number 4. Wreckmate. Yet another Dino Fury villain. Wreckmate has a lot of themes going on at once. He is a robot who looks like a rook from a chess set, but he's also a pirate as well as a general. He's just a lot. He's a lot. He was built from the parts of a boat, but became a giant when the Void Knight gave him a sporix. The Dino Fury Rangers fought him underwater in their Dino Fury Megazord warrior formation, but Wreckmate proved too powerful and was able to defeat the Megazord. Before he could destroy it, he was interrupted by the Moza Razorzord and presumed dead. He entered a competition with his rival teammate Slither to see who could kill the most Rangers, with the loser having to leave forever, though both were of course unsuccessful and unable to score a point. He served the Void Queen soon after, often clashing with and failing to defeat the Rangers. He has shoulder-mounted cannons which can fire cannonballs, energy blasts, lasers, and torpedoes. As a pirate ship-themed robot chess piece, he was of course capable of surviving underwater like a submarine, making him just as dangerous on land as he was on water. Number 3. General Tynamon. Going back to the Super Ninja Steel season, where the Rangers were involved with the whole Galaxy Warriors thing, Tynamon was the manager of one of the most famous fighters, Brax, but was hiding a small secret. It turns out that Tynamon was in fact a small creature who, embarrassed by his small stature, had constructed a robot body to make himself look bigger. Oh, Tynamon, tiny man, I get it, cute. So Tynamon was approached by the villainous Madame Odious, who offered to grow Tynamon to the size he desired if he and Brax would help her destroy the Rangers. He agreed and began a campaign against the heroes. His main weapon is his staff, which can create a protective barrier and can fire a rope line to ensnare and move his enemies. In his final battle with the Rangers, he is hit by the Gigantify Ray, letting him finally achieve his dream of being huge. This was short-lived, however, and he was defeated by the Ninja Steel Ultrazord Blast and died, never really having gotten the opportunity to enjoy his new size. Number 2. King Aradon. Our next villain was actually mentioned in passing by Zordon in Power Rangers Zeo all the way back in 1996, but we didn't get to actually meet this king until just last year in the Mighty Morphin comic book series. After Earth was weakened by the Altarian War and Earth's command center was destroyed, the ruler of the Automaton Dominion, King Aradon, decided to take advantage of the situation and sent scouts to the command center's ruins, where they tried to ambush the Red Ranger. He decided that Earth was ripe for the taking and declared himself ruler with the aid of his general, Count Karnakas. He offered to spare the Green Ranger's life if he stepped aside and allowed the king to destroy Zordon. When the Ranger refused, the two entered a heated battle, which was aided by Red Ranger Rocky, who helped the Rangers triumph over the evil king. Number 1. Leisure. This villain appeared in an episode of the Dino Supercharge season and is vaguely summer themed. There is so much going on visually with this character. She has an ice cream cone for an arm, and a lobster claw coming out of a sun hat for the other. She has fish pants and palm trees for eyes. The longer I look at this villain, the more I feel like I'm having a stroke. 100,000 years ago, Leisure used her vacation ray on the cavemen, which made them all want to take a break from their work and go on vacation. This got so bad that everyone almost starved as no one was hunting, but she was imprisoned in a cave and the effects of her beam were reversed, and as a result, we got hustle culture. She was accidentally released by the Rangers, and despite looking so odd, turned out to be extremely powerful, beating the 7 Rangers with ease before firing her vacation beam on the entire planet, making everyone, including the Rangers, just stop what they were doing to go on vacation. They eventually attacked Leisure with the Plesio Charge Megazord, but she used her ice cream arm triple scoop twist attack to defend herself. She was eventually defeated, and everyone got back to work. Yay!
Number 10. Super Skrull. Kl'rt might be recognizable when it comes to his character design, which admittedly has not changed that much over the years, but when it comes to his alignment, you might be somewhat surprised to learn where he is now, from where he started. Super Skrull Kl'rt made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 18. Once again, the Skrulls attempted to invade Earth and planned on defeating the FF, this time with their secret weapon, the Super Skrull, who seemed to possess all of the Fantastic Four's powers. Unfortunately, Mr. Fantastic and the team realized that these powers were likely not Super Skrull's own, and suspected in fact that they were delivered to him from the Skrull homeworld. They used a device to jam the signal that was giving Kl'rt his powers, defeating him. Currently in the comics, Kl'rt serves Emperor Hulkling and was for a time one of his trusted advisors. Kl'rt, however, was also the one who killed Hulkling's foster mother. Recently in Empire Aftermath, Kl'rt felt so awful about his past that he actually offered his life to the Emperor. Hulkling refused to accept it though, instead preferring to make Kl'rt work in the area of diplomacy so that he might make amends for all the lives that he had taken in times of war. He was like, no. Instead, you gotta save lives, and hopefully that'll make up for it. You can't just die on me, Kl'rt. Number 9. Hell's Bells. Hell's Bells was a group of villains who were all female mutants. The team was originally assembled by Cyber, who trained all of its members and consisted of Shrew, Briquette, Flame, Tremolo, and Vague. When Shrew betrayed them by testifying against them in order to get immunity for herself, the Hell's Bells banded together in an attempt to get revenge on her for betraying them. Eventually, they would be successfully taken into custody by X-Factor. Following the events of M-Day and Decimation, all team members save Briquette found themselves completely depowered. They still have operated as criminals in the comics, appearing in the Children of Atom series most recently, but they were a lot less scary because they had to rely on equipment and gadgets in place of, their own powers. Even without their powers, the team mainly stuck together though, minus Briquette and obviously Shrew. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more lists about Marvel villains you might not recognize or something in that realm, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Silver Samurai. While Silver Samurai looks much the same in the comics as he always has, not every iteration of him has been so recognizable. We've seen him turn up here and there on Krakoa recently. He seems to enjoy watching and participating in the friendly single combat matches in the Quarry, and in modern comics, he's recognizable. But how about in modern film? Well, Silver Samurai might not be a main character in Fox's mutant universe, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. He actually made an appearance in the 2013 film The Wolverine. But although here he also seemingly looked the same, when it came to his armor at least, he couldn't be further from his comic book counterpart in actuality. That's because Silver Samurai here was an adamantium robot whom Wolverine had to battle against. Yeah, they made Kennyukio Harada robot armor. He was at least piloted by Ikiro Yoshida, who was obviously that film's version of Ken's own father in the comics. So, at least there was a little bit of a thing, but still, he wasn't even a person. He was just robot armor. Like, rude. Ken is a whole person, okay? It's not just armor. Number 7, Forearm. Forearm is Michael McCain. Originally, Michael was part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. He was one of the founding members, but would end up defeated by those that fought against him. Despite generally being on the side of the villains, Forearm was also welcomed onto the mutant island nation of Krakoa, where he could have a fresh start for himself. He accepted the offer and would end up joining Sword and being seen as a member of Magic's Dark Riders, who I think should get their own book. However, on Krakoa, he looks a bit different from his initial appearance, where he decidedly was showing a lot more forearm and had much less shirt. Forearm's mutant power is that he has 4 arms. Get it? Get it? He has 4 arms. And now he wears shirts. Good for you, Forearm. Good for you. Although you can also not wear a shirt. You can not wear a shirt if you don't want to wear a shirt. Like, I'm not going to pressure anyone to wear shirts if they don't want to. Or vice versa. I'm not going to pressure anyone to not wear a shirt if they're like, I like my shirt, let me keep my shirt. But I do like his new design as well. His new outfit is pretty cool. Number 6, Thanos. Thanos might look very similar to his initial appearance in the comics, and also looks quite similar on the big screen, but he's seen a pretty big change when it comes to what he's up to recently. In the comics, that is. In the MCU, he's mainly dead and gone, but there is a chance perhaps that he could return. Who knows? Not only have we now met Star Fox or Eros in the MCU, but in the comics, Thanos has become the new Prime Eternal, and as such, their new leader. That's right, this guy just went from being the baddest supervillain around to leader of a superhero team. Although we'll have to see where the Eternals' alignment is in the comics following the events of Avengers vs. X-Men vs. Eternals War, because that's probably going to be crazy. Also, I don't even know what the Eternals is really doing in that mix, but I'm here for it. I'm here to check that out. Number 5, Electro. The main Electro we've known for years is Maxwell Dillon, But there is a new Electro on the scene. This new Electro is Francine Fry. She was once the accomplice and love interest of Max, who died as a result of her love for him, and her obsession with villains and kinda her lust for them. While Max's powers were less in his control, Francine threw caution to the wind and decided to kiss him. Their kiss would result in her being electrified to death. However, she'd later be revived by Ben Reilly, operating as villain the Jackal, as part of a plot to help control Electro into basically doing his bidding. Turns out the DNA Reilly used to resurrect Francine in clone form was actually a mix of Maxwell's and her own as a result of that kiss, allowing her to harness and absorb electricity, chiefly the power of the suit that a depowered Max had at the time been given. Kissing Max once more, Francine absorbed the suit's powers, accidentally killing him in the process and becoming the new Electro. Max has since been resurrected, so now even more confusing, we have two Electros technically running around.
Up next, we're taking a look at Richard Fisk, now known as the Rose. The son of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, Richard would boast about how rich and powerful his father was, thinking he was just a highly successful businessman. Now, even if that was the case, like, come on, don't go around boasting about your parents' accomplishments. Live your own life. Well, that's exactly what Richard decided to do. Upon discovering his father was actually the kingpin of crime, Richard faked his own death and took on the moniker of the Schemer, attempting to take down his father's empire. The two would eventually reconcile after Richard felt bad about putting his dad into a coma. Fair enough. But this brings us to Richard's next moniker, the Rose. He now sported a purple mask and kept a rose in his front pocket and worked under his father, but secretly wanted to dismantle the Kingpin's organization from within. After killing a policeman in a shootout, however, Rose just realized he was a bad dude and allied himself with his father again, but then changed his mind and wanted to take over Kingpin's organization again. Just kill your dad or don't, man. It's a decision we all have to make at some point in our lives.
Number 3. Grey Goblin. Gabriel Stacy has been known by a few different names throughout the years, and has also had his backstory somewhat altered. Initially, we knew Gabe Stacy as Grey Goblin, and later as American Son in Age of Heroes. Originally, he was introduced to us as the son of Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy, who basically had a secret love affair which resulted in the birth of two twin babies, Sarah and Gabriel. However, when Gabriel and Sarah were revealed to be the mysterious demonic villain returning from hell, known as Kindred, we learned that they were actually never really the natural born children of Norman and Gwen, thank goodness, but instead were clones that Harry Osborn had made, using their genetic material to get back at his father, tormenting him and making him think the two were really his children, when actually they weren't. It was all Harry's plot, ha ha ha. Not only did Gabriel have a completely different look as Kindred, but he also got a completely different backstory that explained away all the weirdness of his and Sarah's original origins. Which, I mean, thank you for that, because wow, that was bad. It's not good. I don't want Norman to sleep with Gwen. I'm not here for that.
This next baseball player turned villain is known as Frederick Myers, aka Boomerang, and he's gone through several changes, having worked under criminal organizations like the Sinister Syndicate, as an assassin, going up against a number of heroes, and of course Spider-Man. So how did this boomerang wielding baddie change? Well, he ended up aiding Black Widow, Maria Hill, and the Champions in their fight against Hydra, and cut a deal to get a full pardon for all his past crimes. That's pretty sweet. He later became Peter Parker's roommate in an attempt to get closer to Spider-Man as he was attempting to find the pieces of the Lifetime tablet. Though Boomerang was lying about his true motives to Spidey, saying he was only after the tablet to keep it away from Kingpin, this was quite the opposite actually, he was working for Kingpin. Despite his deception, however, Frederick actually formed a close bond with the hero and would go on to sacrifice his own life to save him during a fight with the vampiric villain Morlun.
Number 1. Green Goblin. Norman Osborn is often known as the villain the Green Goblin, one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains, if not the most iconic rogue he happens to have in his gallery. Their rivalry is an old one, going all the way back to the first appearance of the character in the 1960s, where Osborn actually first appeared not in his civilian form, but simply as the villain Green Goblin. But lately, Norman has had a change of heart, if you can believe that. It most certainly won't last forever, or at least I'd be very surprised if it did, but currently in the comics, Norman Norman is actually one of the good guys for a change. This is after he had all of his sins purified by the villain known as Sin Eater. Initially, Peter as Spider-Man had saved Norman from Sin Eater, but after being taunted about Gwen, couldn't help but toss Green Goblin to the villain to be devoured, which, I mean, fair enough. But instead of perishing, Norman survived the encounter, no longer driven by madness, guilt, or rage. Having been purified, he was seemingly given a new lease on life, and currently remains one of the few villains purified by Sin Eater to stay that way. At least.
Number 10. Phone Pan Z. During the Ninja Steel season of the show that ran in 2017 and 2018, the Rangers were forced into a gladiatorial-style intergalactic tournament called Galaxy Warriors. They faced many competitors who were trying to kill them and steal the Ninja Power Stars. Oh, that sounds important. One who actually came pretty close to besting the team was the contestant named Phone Pan Z. As is implied by the name, he is a hybrid of a chimpanzee and a phone. Although he is a capable hand-to-hand combatant and can unleash basher bots upon his enemies, his real strengths come from the deception skills that his phone parts grant him. Not only can he use the speaker in his mouth to unleash a massive sonic boom that would send his enemies flying, but he could mimic voices with uncanny accuracy. This allowed him to imitate a ranger and then call up one of their teammates, who he would then draw into a trap and attack. The host of the Galaxy Warriors, Cosmo Royale, then used a Gigantify machine to turn Phone Pan Z giant, forcing the Rangers to use their Zords to form the Ninja Steel Megazord and the Bull Rider Megazord. They defeated the giant monster, who promptly exploded. Okay, that's weird, but I think I'm following this okay so far. As long as the villains don't get any stranger than that, I should be fine. Number 9. Typeface. Oh come on, that's a keyboard! After the Ninja Steel season, fans of the Power Rangers were given the Super Ninja Steel season. Like Phone Pan Z, Typeface is a contestant in the Galaxy Warriors. He could summon basher bolts and was an expert fighter, being able to hold his own against multiple Rangers at once, which is really impressive because he doesn't look like he'd be super mobile. He can fire lasers out of his hands and spacebar, which were powerful enough to incapacitate all 6 of the Rangers. And he is also a teleporter, but his real strength is more tech-based, which, yeah, I should hope so, otherwise the theming is kinda weird. He has a virus gun, which can infect the weapons of the Rangers, making them unable to effectively fight his with their Element Star Ninja Fire attack. The Rangers were eventually able to repair their weapons and attack Typeface, and Cosmo Royale repeated his strategy of growing Typeface into a giant monster who had to be defeated by a Megazord. However, this was a difficult task due to him being able to use his teleportation abilities to dodge several attacks and gain the upper hand for a while. However, the Rangers were eventually able to take him out with the Ninja Blaze Megazord's Ranger Blast final attack. Yeah, you gotta watch out for those. Number 8. Pandemonium. In the Mighty Morphin comic series, the new Green Ranger destroyed the Green Chaos Crystal, which left the infamous Lord Zed incapacitated. As he recovered in the Moon Palace, Zed's cronies discussed their options about what their next course of action should be. They considered eliminating their boss, but decided against it as it would require them to grow spines, and instead decided to try and capture the Green Ranger so that when Lord Zed awoke, he would have someone to vent his frustrations on other than them. They created a creature called Pandemonium, who was of course a panda who had super strength, as well as an entire arsenal of spears and axes sticking out of his back, which he could remove and use against the team. He could also give off massive energy blasts, which damaged anyone caught in his vicinity. The panda gave the team some trouble, but was defeated when the new Green Ranger showed up and used his dragon dagger to destroy the creature. Zed's cronies watched from afar and bemoaned that they had chosen too cute and cuddly of an animal to be their agent of destruction. Number 7. Horrid King. In the Power Rangers comic series, the Rangers and Zordon are not on good terms, as the Rangers have taken off in a ship searching for a means of defeating the Imperials in deep space, with the evil Lord Drakon serving as their guide. Things soon start going south when their ship stops working and they discover that they have been boarded by a frightening race of alien energy-draining vampires known as the Horrid, and their king. The Horrid were once a peaceful race of people, but their planet was destroyed when they attempted to control reality, body, trapping them in between dimensions, neither alive or dead. They learned that they could absorb other beings' life forces in order to take on a physical form. The Horrid King led them across the galaxy looking for beings that they could absorb before coming across the Rangers. The king and all of his people cannot be harmed by physical attacks when in a non-physical form, as all weapons simply pass through them. However, if they have fed enough to take on a physical form, they become vulnerable. This weakness was exploited by Dracon, who killed the Horrid King and took his place as the Horrid's leader. Number 6. Vargoyle. Vargoyle, the robotic villain, was one of the early inventions of Scrozzle, but when they discovered something called the Fury Cells, Vargoyle used them to become powerful beyond measure, but also evil. Scrozzle escaped and Vargoyle followed, but eventually agreed to work for Evox in exchange for the Beast Powers upgrade. He was sent after the Rangers, where he feigned being weaker than he was to lull them into a false sense of security before unleashing his full might when they least expected it. He manages to install a memory rewriting machine in a local TV transmitting tower to wipe everyone's memories of his boss's previous attacks. This was undone, and he was destroyed by Devon's Beast X cannon. He was revived by the villain Yellowjacket, who wanted to form an alliance with Evox. This revived Vargoyle had an upgraded golden body, but was also fitted with a compliance collar, which he of course was not thrilled about. His teleportation and weapon summoning powers are handy, and his beast powers give him a real edge between his cheetah speed and gorilla strength, but it was not long before this evil robot was taken out again, never to be rebuilt.
At number 5 is the Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn. As if this villain wasn't enough of a contender for Spidey to deal with before, he actually takes on the Carnage symbiote, turning him into the Red Goblin, as mentioned before. This makes him nearly unstoppable, forcing the good guys to employ anti-venom on him in order to take him out for good. And even though he has since gone back to being the Green Goblin, the character takes another turn that makes him unrecognizable from his past self during the events of Kindred Rising. And by unrecognizable, I mean that he's now working with Spider-Man. When Sin Eater cleanses Norman of his sins, his allegiances change and he becomes a hero. At number 4 we have Dr. Doom. These days, Dr. Doom has taken on some pretty unstoppable powers that some would even describe as being godlike. Big fans of Victor Von Doom might have expected him to reach a point like this at some point because of his insatiable hunger for power, but as of 2022, he's already surpassed at least my expectations of what he was capable of. Although they haven't stuck around until the time that we're posting this, he has taken the powers of the Silver Surfer and even the Beyonder, giving him a whole new mantle of God Emperor Doom during the Secret Wars storyline. Just for scale, this gave Dr. Doom the ability to piece together broken pieces of the universe after the multiversal collapse. And that's a pretty crazy glow up if you ask me. And even if he doesn't hold quite that much power these days, having had that ability has changed the character forever, if you ask me. At number 3 is Darkseid. Originally introduced as a nearly unstoppable supervillain and one of the most powerful in the whole DC universe, Darkseid's powers have been dumbed down quite a bit since then. Although he appears the same, his immense power level just isn't the same these days as it always was. For example, his eye beams were originally meant to kill his targets in one hit, but these days, they don't by any means take out their targets in one hit. He used to be almost unbeatable, but it seems like heroes are making easier work of him than ever as of late. This is probably a result of him appearing more often in the comics, because if he'd kept his same unstoppable status, his appearances would have to be regulated, or else our heroes would be out of commission in the blink of an eye. At number 2 is Anti-Monitor. Another case of a villain getting nerfed. Anti-Monitor's gotten it bad these days. If you thought Darkseid got taken down a notch, just think how much room there would be to do the same with Anti-Monitor, because he is, after all, the most powerful being in the DC multiverse. Just to get an idea of what I mean, back in the day, Anti-Monitor takes out multiple universes alone before he reaches ours, and then once he does, it takes a hell of a lot to take him down. In fact, it became one of the most notable moments in all of the DC comics when they did, because it was so difficult. But when he returns from his defeat and joins the Sinestro Corps, he just seems to be in a totally different echelon of power, a lesser one, to the point where the Justice League can take him out on their own these days, which is just weird to see for fans who knew his power level back in the day. At number 1 is the Batman Who laughs. Enough with the downgrades, because this guy's change is a glow up if I've ever seen one. These days, the Batman who laughs has gained so much power that he's known to be basically godlike, and he finds these new powers in the place that he comes from, the Dark Multiverse. After finding a Dr. Manhattan powered Batman in the Dark Multiverse, the Batman who laughs gets his mind transferred into the body of that hero, acquiring the greater part of Dr. Manhattan's abilities, but with the sinister touch of his usual self as well. The only way that he's able to be taken down is when Wonder Woman finds a way to match his power level herself and defeats him despite his insane power boost.
Number 10. Harley Quinn. While Harley Quinn's character design and costume has been changed, it's pretty similar to a lot of looks we've seen her in the past. Mostly what we're seeing in her new series is a change to art style, and with her new role as Batman's ally and sidekick, a complete shift over to the side of being a hero. Harley is of course still bringing her unique approach to heroism, so don't panic if you are a fan of Harley's wackiness and standout personality. But considering where she came from, being Joker's sidekick, this is a pretty big change to her character as we originally knew her. If you've been out of the comics for some time and aren't quite as well versed in Harley Quinn's history, you might not recognize her in 2021 as she's gone from full villain to full hero. Number 9. Poison Ivy. Over the last few years, Ivy has gotten a few pretty drastic redesigns, so if you are reading her in 2021 from anywhere along her recent history in the past 3 to 5 years, you might be a little confused when it comes to her look and ask yourself, wait a minute, is that Ivy? Also, who's Queen Ivy? We've seen her go from eco-villain to hero and environmental activist and spokesperson to dead to alive, and split down the middle between those two warring personas, the villain and the hero, when we literally got 2 Ivies. Then from there she became Queen Ivy and got a complete redesign when it came to her costume. Now she's back to wreaking havoc on Gotham, or is she? Time will tell what alignment we'll see for Ivy in the future, but either way I'm here for the ride. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want to learn about more cool redesigns and updates to characters that we've seen recently, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Especially in the Batverse, I feel like there's so many Bat characters that have been introduced and redesigned, it's awesome. Number 7. Black Mask. Black Mask not only has a new look and redesign, in future state that is, that I must admit is spectacular, but he also got a power upgrade during the Year of the Villain event. Black Mask was given the ability to change his identity with the added upgrade of an identity changing mask, which is pretty powerful. Also, his suits have gotten admittedly a lot more stylish over the past few years, so for those who remember his classic look, Roman Sionis may have the same mask, but the rest of his look also seems to have received an upgrade. Number 6. The Freezes. That's right, not only does Freeze get a new redesign, but he also gets a huge change in the fact that he was joined by his family, becoming a little supervillain fam jam unit all their own. 2 separate units really. In the main continuity, Mr. Freeze was given a serum by Luthor that allowed him to make his long-lasting wish come true. He was able to revive, cure, and become reunited with his frozen love Nora, who also ended up joining him in a life of crime. Yay! However, while it all started out sweet, their reunion would quickly turn sour when Nora became resentful of Victor for making so many choices for her, and in her eyes, trying to control her. Victor blamed the serum for her change of heart, but I mean, who really knows? I feel like Nora's kinda got a bit of a point, even though I feel really bad for Victor in this scenario. In Batman issue 96, we are treated to an alternate Victor Freeze who commits crimes alongside his sons as a little criminal family unit. Super cute.
Number 5. Killer Croc. We got our first look at Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc, in Detective Comics number 524. In this version, he had a medical condition that gave his skin a rough, scaly appearance, earning him the nickname Killer Croc. In his first appearance, Croc is actually pretty cunning, being able to rise almost to the top of the Gotham underworld. His physical appearance is also pretty tame, being gray and scaly but still clearly a human being. As he made subsequent appearances, not only did he get dumber, but his look became more and more exaggerated until he eventually looked like an actual crocodile, with green scales, sharp teeth, and sometimes even a tail. His size in the original comics is large, but still within believable human proportions, whereas at this point, he is so tall that it's hard to imagine any skin condition resulting in a villain like Croc. Number 4. The Green Goblin. Arguably Spider-Man's greatest foe is the Green Goblin, first appearing all the way back in Amazing Spider-Man number 14 1914, the Green Goblin had a pretty consistent look for most of his career, sporting a purple and green costume with a horrifying, grinning goblin mask with a purple hat. He flies around on a bat-shaped glider and throws exploding pumpkins at Spidey. Over the years, Norman Osborn has had a few different aliases and therefore costumes, such as the Iron Patriot and the Goblin King, but it's usually not long before he's back in the green duds. More recently though, he's trying to be a hero and is wearing a white and gold bodysuit and going by the name Gold Goblin. The glider kinda gives it away, but based purely on the costume, would you think this is the same guy? If that's not different enough for you, just take a look at the Green Goblin in the Ultimate Universe, where he is more like a Hulk than the classic villain. Number 3. Victor Fries. This classic Batman villain was very different in his first appearance in Batman Volume 1, number 121. He was a scientist who suffered an accident that forced him to wear a specialized cryosuit that kept his body temperature below freezing. He soon began committing crimes not as Mr. Freeze, but as Mr. Zero. His original look was a green and pink bodysuit with a bubble-shaped helmet feeding him cold air. When the character was adapted for the 60s television show, he was renamed Mr. Freeze, and this name eventually was brought over into the comics. His look began to evolve closer to how we now know him, but he remained a rather C-list villain until the 90s animated series revamped his origin to be a tragic figure trying to find a cure for his sick wife. This interpretation was so popular that it was also brought into the comics. The character is now very different from his original appearances, but it is interesting to see how much he has changed over the years due to his adaptations in other media. Number 2. Catwoman. I know, there are a lot of Batman villains on this list, but that is mostly because they tend to be a much more consistent group of villains than a lot of other heroes have, and also because they're the best comic book rogues gallery by a country mile. First appearing all the way back in Batman number 1 in 1940, Catwoman was very similar to her modern personality, being a brazen and flirtatious cat burglar. In this first story, however, she doesn't dress as a cat, but instead uses various disguises to steal a jeweled necklace from a boat and is simply known as the Cat. In her next appearance in Batman number 2, she is still not wearing a full-on costume, but is referred to as Catwoman for the first time. When she shows up again in Batman number 3, she finally gets a costume consisting of a long flowing yellow dress, a red cape, and a literal cat head mask. In Batman number 35, her costume evolves more into something that we today would recognize as Catwoman, with a purple dress, green cape, and less intense cat mask. The look stayed the same after that for a few decades until the comics took some inspiration from her look in the 60s TV show, and she ended up in the skin-tight catsuit that has evolved into the look we all know and love today. Number 1. Thunderbolt Ross. For most of his history, since Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross first appeared in Incredible Hulk number 1, he has remained pretty much the same. He's an angry mustachioed general obsessed with capturing or killing the Hulk. He stayed this way for decades, being a constant antagonist in the Hulk stories, but the status quo changed in 2008 when he joined the group of villains known as the Intelligentsia, who helped transform Ross into the Red Hulk. Since then, Red Hulk has been both villain and hero, but if you saw the original Ross next to the Red Hulk, you would have no reason to suspect that they are one and the same. Number 10. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn was created in the classic 90s Batman animated series where she was the Joker's main henchwench and girlfriend. She proved so popular that she was brought into the main comic book continuity, where she was dressed pretty much the same as she was in the animated show, with a red and black jester costume. Over the years, both her look and personality have evolved as she has broken away from the Joker and become her own person, who is a bit more of an anti-hero at this point. Although her color scheme has remained the same, she now has a bit more of a wild look, wearing a red and black corset and leather jacket, letting her blonde hair with dyed pigtails flow free. It is a major difference, but there are other characters who have changed even more, which is why Harley is at the bottom of this list. Number 9. Paste Pot Pete. Originally, Pete used a glue gun to commit robberies while dressed in this rather strange green jumpsuit and purple beret. Paste Pot Pete is really Peter Petruski, a scientist who developed an advanced adhesive that made him very wealthy. However, he believed that a life of crime would be even more lucrative and began robbing banks and stealing missiles. He updated his costume a couple times, going for a more purple pouchy theme, and ended up changing his name to the Trapster after Spider-Man burst into hysterical laughter upon upon hearing the name Paste Pot Pete. He made some minor updates to his look in the following years, but eventually settled on a yellow and brown outfit that he still wears in his most recent appearance. None of his looks are particularly menacing, but if I saw his first look side by side with his second look and was told that one was called Paste Pot Pete and the other the Trapster, I would have no reason to think that they were the same villain, other than both using a similar weapon. But at the same time, so do Captain Cold and Mr. Freeze. Number 8. Hawkeye. In his first appearance in Tales of Suspense number 57, Clint Barton was a carnival worker who performed incredible trick shots with arrows. When the audience was unimpressed with his performance and booed him off stage, he became jealous when he saw Iron Man show up to save the day when one of the rides went haywire, much to the crowd's delight. He thinks to himself, "I'm the greatest marksman the world has ever known, and yet they ignore me." He decides that if he makes himself a few trick arrows, he will be just as respected as Iron Man, because a guy in a purple tunic and mask shooting arrows is just as impressive as a flying weaponized robot suit. He becomes a supervillain, going toe-to-toe with Iron Man. In the years since his first appearance, Hawkeye has gone from supervillain to superhero and has had multiple identities and costumes, but in his most recent appearances, he has traded his more flashy masked look for what is essentially just a black t-shirt with a purple arrow on it and some sunglasses. Without the context of the many years of stories between his first and most recent appearances, not only would you be confused as to his very different look, you'd also be surprised at how a supervillain is now one of the most frequent members of the Avengers. Number 7. The Riddler. Since his first appearance in Detective Comics number 140, the Riddler's gimmick has remained pretty much the same. He is hyper-intelligent and uses elaborate traps, puzzles, and of course riddles to prove that he is smarter than the Batman. His look has remained pretty consistent across media, with him wearing a green spandex bodysuit covered in question marks for much of his career. Other times, when he's feeling dapper, he wears a green suit and bowler hat. This has been his look in almost every comic, and when he was first adapted for live action in the 1960s television show, Frank Gorshin's costume felt ripped right from the pages of the comics, with him alternating between the spandex and green suit looks. When Jim Carrey took over the role for Batman Forever, it was very much the same. Even when the character showed up in Gotham, he was pretty faithful to the character's original look. However, when Matt Reeves decided to take a more grounded approach to the character in the recent The Batman movie, he had Paul Dano's Riddler in an unrecognizable style. Gone were the spandex, and in its place was a green raincoat and a winter combat mask. You know, it's funny, when I watched this movie with my parents, they hadn't seen any of the marketing, and when Riddler showed up in the opening moments of the film, it wasn't until they saw his first riddle that they realized who he was. It's a bold new look for a bold new take on the character, but if Riddler shows up in a sequel, I wouldn't mind if he went just a touch more classic with his look now that he's an established villain. I mean, there's nothing really that heightened about a guy wearing a green suit jacket. Number 6. Metallo. John Corbin was a very minor Superman villain who first appeared in Action Comics number 252 in 1959. In this story, he was a regular man who was in a car accident before being transformed by a scientist into a robot covered with foam latex which looked like flesh. He was given a kryptonite-powered heart, and he soon clashed with the Man of Steel. In his first appearance, he's just a guy with a pencil mustache wearing a suit, and there's nothing really notable about him. In fact, he dies in his first appearance. Once the New Earth continuity began, a revamped version of the character was introduced with probably his most iconic look. He was still a regular-looking guy, but usually his skin would soon get torn off, and he would be seen as a menacing metal skeleton, not unlike the Terminator. In more recent appearances, he's in a more bulky mech suit with glowing green components. He is quite an underrated villain, but if you saw the current version or the skeleton version next to the original guy in a suit version, you'd have no reason to suspect all three were the same character.
Number 5. Man-Bat. While so many supervillains are getting power upgrades, additional allies, and more horrifying redesigns, Man-Bat is going the other way with it. Man-Bat is Kirk Langstrom, who ends up joining the Justice League Dark and gets a much more adorable character redesign as a result. He looks a lot less monstrous and a lot more humanoid and cute. Kinda geeky. It's great. He even wears a bow tie. Ah! This is likely a redesign meant to symbolize Man-Bat having tackled some of his personal demons and his move more towards a heroic role as opposed to a completely tortured soul and uncontrollable monster. Number 5. Scarecrow. Scarecrow already looked pretty terrifying in the comics, but now he looks intimidating as well. very intimidating. Not just maniacal and crazed. We got a fresh look at the Scarecrow redesign in previews for Infinite Frontier, and then in all his glory in the actual comic itself in issue 0. Here, Scarecrow appears to wear a gas mask with straw or sticks coming out of his head, almost like a crown. He is armed with long fingernails or claws at the end of his gloves, evoking a sort of Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street feel, especially as these claws seem to be directly connected to vials of fear toxin, which have tubes connecting to Scarecrow's headpiece? That's what it looks like to me. I think the idea is possibly that Crane is producing the fear toxin himself from his own mind and sending it down to these vials to be dispersed whenever he manages to scratch an enemy with one of his needle-pointed claws. All in all, it's a pretty intense look that might leave you asking who this character is, but kind of in a good way, as I consider this redesign to be an upgrade to the villain. Number 4. Catwoman. Catwoman in Batman Earth 1 has come in with a wild new look that will leave you floored. I mean, you will admittedly still recognize her, just not as the Catwoman that you're used to seeing. This version of Catwoman, instead of wearing her typical black or dark purple catsuit, looks a lot more noticeable and bold by comparison in terms of her design, especially for a thief. Here we see Catwoman donning a purple crop top and hot pants with striped thigh-high socks. She still sports a purple color motif at least though, so that helps with the recognition. Also, she has a paw print belt buckle and a cat mask, a literal cat mask, and she's got a cat on her shirt. Still, this look and redesign for the character is definitely very different. Very unique, I would say. Number 3. Bane. Really, Bane's daughter goes by the alias of Vengeance, but she definitely looks and seems to be following in her supposed father's footsteps. Bane's daughter was first introduced in the new Joker series in issue number 2, and is revealed to be the daughter of the supervillain who went through a series of experiments to give her super strength like her dad. Her mission is to get revenge for his death, and she's doing so by hunting down the Joker, who she and many others believe was responsible for the events and many deaths of A-Day. Her father, who was in Arkham Asylum at the time, was one of the victims of that attack and died. So Bane Jr., aka Vengeance, is out for blood. Number 2. Clayface. You really won't recognize Clayface in the new Batman Earth 1 volume. Clayface is not very recognizable here in terms of the story, as he is disguised for most of his appearance and in terms of his character design. Near the end of the story, we learn that Adrian Arkham, Bruce's grandfather, who returned from the dead, was in actuality Clayface in disguise. We're all used to seeing more of a giant mud monster when it comes to how Clayface is depicted, but instead, here we get a very kind of, I don't know, smooth looking baldy figure in the end, who appears to really kind of just be a man. Like a man who can shapeshift, but just a guy. Like a guy who, if you saw him on the streets, you wouldn't run in terror from him or anything. You might just notice his skin was like a little odd looking in terms of its texture, but that's about it. Other than that, he looks pretty average. Number 1. Two-Face. The Earth 1 version of Two-Face sees the character completely reinvented in a way you might not have expected, which is what makes it so great. On Earth 1, Harvey and his sister Jessica are working together to clean up Gotham alongside their good friend Bruce Wayne. After Harvey ends up dead, however, Jessica and Bruce are forced to continue their mission to eradicate corruption and crime in Gotham without Harvey, working on in his honor. But Harvey lives on in more than just their intentions. It turns out that Jessica develops a dissociative personality disorder, in essence becoming her brother due to the trauma of his loss. At least that's what it seems like if we had to explain it on paper. Although never explicitly called Two-Face, the duality of this version exists in the goodness of Jessica and the contrasting ruthless aggression of Harvey. Honestly, the story is so good, you really need to check out the new Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, because even knowing where this story goes, even though I just told you that part, it's still an amazingly compelling read, so go read it, even though you kinda know spoilers now. Number 10. The Builders. The Builders are a recent addition of the Marvel Rogues Gallery, only recently approaching their 10th year of existence in the comics, which makes them sound old, but really relative to comic book history, they're still pretty new, because Marvel Comics I think has been going on for like 80 years. Whoa! The Builders are a race of beings who claim to have created most of the known worlds in the universe, seeding worlds and influencing the development of civilizations for eons. They are also said to be a perfect race of beings, and when the multiverse appears to be dying as a result of incursions, they take it upon themselves to clean up the mess by wiping out complete worlds and empires, which puts them at odds with the heroes of Earth during the Infinity crossover event.
Number 9. The Black Winter. Ready to be slightly confused? Good. So the Marvel multiverse rebirths itself whenever it gets destroyed. Right now the multiverse is currently in its 8th version. Everything prior to the most recent Secret Wars and the incursions and the battle world and all that took place in the 7th version. Before that came to be, there was, get this, the 6th version. And when that version was destroyed, only one being survived. That would be the character who became Galactus. Well, now we know how the 6th cosmos was destroyed, and ooh, it's scary. The 6th cosmos was actually consumed by an entity called the Black Winter, essentially a living storm of destruction and entropy on a multiversal scale, like Galactus but for universes. Kind of. When the Black Winter ate the 6th cosmos, it allowed Galen, Galactus' real name, to live on into the 7th cosmos, and serve as its herald. Now, funnily enough, Galactus mostly ignored his heralding duties until the day the Black Winter showed up in the 7th cosmos in 2019. Galactus turned to Thor for help, but the two were unable to cooperate, and Thor wound up slaying Galactus, something the Black Winter prophesied would actually happen. Then Thor turned the corpse of Galactus into a power cosmic explosion and blew up the Black Winter. But before it went away, it showed Thor how he will perish at the hands of Thanos wielding an Infinity Stone encrusted Mjolnir. So now we have that to look forward to.
Number 8. Mr. Misery. Mr. Misery is a Doctor Strange villain that was actually created by Doctor Strange himself. Some people create their own villains. Oof. Some people are their own villains. Ah. Mr. Misery was a creature that embodied all the pain and misery that Strange had suffered from using magic during his time as Sorcerer Supreme. The beast was also commonly referred to as the Thing in the Cellar. At least, well, that's what it was originally referred to as. We'll get to that in a second. The Thing in the Cellar was released when all magic was threatened during the attack of the technological army known as Empirical. Mr. Misery is actually the name the creature took for itself after Doctor Strange was forced to reckon with it following its accidental release. Strange freed the creature by depositing his suffering and pain instead into the people that he had saved, dividing it up so that each only carried a small piece of it within them. These people were also willing to do so as they had been saved by Strange in the past. So they were like, yo, Strange is my guy, I'll take a little bit of pain for you, no problem. Even after being freed, Mr. Misery continued to crave the pain and suffering of others, which is, you know, why he took the name Mr. Misery and became a villain. Or they. It. It's kind of like a blob.
Number 7. Horticulture. Ever since I learned about this group, I will take any opportunity to talk about them. Horticulture is a group of 4 older women between the ages of 64 to 81 who are all expert botanists. They are Augusta Brones, Lily Lamus, Edith Scutch, and Opal Vedivere. And their goal is simple. Sort of. Essentially, they want to bring Earth back to a more pristine time. A time when it had about 7 billion less people on it. Yes, these ladies want to basically exterminate most of the Earth's human population and bring plants back to the forefront, and specifically flowers, which is kind of a lovely idea, sort of. This goal brings them into conflict with the X-Men in 2019's X-Men number 3, because the nation of Krakoa, that the mutants call home, have been mass producing these flowers with different bio and tech purposes, and these ladies would like to use them for their villainous goals. Beyond biological modifications believed to have been made to themselves, the women of horticulture are experts at manipulating the environment to suit their extinction agenda. And they're also computer programmers, selling software to the anti-mutant group Orcus to monitor Krakoan gateways. So now you know.
Number 6. Cordyceps Jones. Although he might not be as new as some of the other villains mentioned here, Cordyceps Jones is still a relatively new villain, if you've been out of comics for the last few years at least. He first appeared back in 2017 in Rocket issue number 4 and was created by Al Ewing and Adam Gorham. Cordyceps Jones is known for having a salacious reputation across the cosmos. He's a 30,000-year-old fungal parasite who, due to his longevity, has made an intergalactic fortune and is known for owning many successful casinos across the cosmos. Recently, he appeared in the X-Men series where he seems to be threatening the existence of Earth, setting up a bet for fun to see who can be the first to wipe it out. Because, you know, that's what you do when you're a rich fungal parasite and you've been around for too long. That's what happens. You gotta make some bets. Number 5. Rhino. Rhino was given a completely new look for his appearance in the second Amazing Spider-Man film. Honestly, Rhino is a hard villain to do in live action, I feel like, so I'm not surprised with the direction that they went with, but also, what a weird direction to go in for that character, considering what they're actually supposed to be like in the comics. In the comics, Rhino is Alexei Sistovich, who is genetically altered and then bonded to a suit of armor that increases his strength and durability. Basically, he's given like a mechanical rhino skin, but like the skin. The armor was modeled after a rhinoceros, as they are known in nature for being relentless when it comes to their assault and extremely hard to defeat due to their tough hide. Rhino, however, has never been known for being very smart, which makes him fairly easy to defeat usually, which seems to be the same idea when it came to his cinematic counterpart. However, the whole design for this character was definitely different than the comic book counterpart, whose armor was much less neck-like or robotic and is more like just the tough hide of a rhino. Really, he kind of just looks like a guy in a rhino suit in the comics. Also, Alexei is just super jacked in the comics, and his cinematic counterpart didn't seem so jacked. He was just like a guy in a suit. Of course, Alexei does get a lot of his jackedness as well from his whole rhino thing, but he also, I think, was jacked still to begin with. I'm pretty sure. He's just more jacked. Number 4, Legion. Legion has a new look in X-Men Onslaught Revelation. This one-shot is kind of like the bookend for the Way of X limited series if you were checking that out, which I personally haven't read all of, but I will say the parts of it that I have read have been strictly excellent, so I would recommend Way of X to anyone that's interested. If you like the idea of pondering the why in life and beliefs, and you enjoy philosophical prose, this is really a great series for you. In Onslaught Revelation, Nightcrawler, Legion, Pixie, and Dust come together to try and defeat the resurrected Onslaught, who has been slowly returning with each resurrection, residing as pieces in the minds of all mutants. In order to help in the fight against Onslaught, Legion makes his mind a safe space for all mutants to come through, in essence also fully connecting with Krakoa and kind of becoming a sort of hive mind if necessary. As such, he gets a redesign, though he still gets to keep the wild shape of his hair that we've all come to recognize so well, and that I've really come to love. Legion, moving forward after the defeat of Onslaught, will also keep this look as he becomes the newly created religion's church. That's right, Legion is the church. He's the building. In essence, people can come into his mind to worship, find community, and seek sanctuary. It's like a nice safe space for people to come and just like be and feel good. It's awesome. I love that Legion is the church. I just think that's great. Number 3, Donald Blake. Donald Blake ended up becoming a villain recently in the comics, which is a pretty big change for a guy who was once also the mighty hero Thor. Donald Blake used to be Thor's human form, but in reality was kind of his own person, or he kind of ended up becoming his own person. He was created by Odin to be a human host for Thor, but after Thor died at the hands of the serpent, Blake became separated from Thor and became his own separate entity. Eventually, he would end up going to the Enchantress for help, only for her to use him to make her own villainous creature referred to as the Keep. Basically, she killed Donald Blake and then used his blood to make the Keep, and we haven't seen the Keep in a while, but I'm sure he's out there somewhere. After Amora and the Keep were defeated by Thor, Blake was laid to rest, living on as a disembodied head in a dream world that was crafted for him. Well, living on as a person in the dream world, but he was just a disembodied head. But he was asleep, so he was dreaming. Eventually, though, Blake came to realize that this world wasn't real, and awoke from his dream, seeking revenge on all Thors across the multiverse for what had happened to him. And don't worry, he wasn't just a head then. He had a body then. He would end up being defeated by 616 Thor in the end, and then made into the God of Lies, as per Thor's brother Loki's suggestion. Thor was like, what do we do with this guy? We shouldn't kill this guy. He's Donald Blake. Loki's like, nah, let's make him the God of Lies. Seems to fit considering everything Donald Blake has been through. Number 2, Taskmaster. Taskmaster is Anthony Masters and is known for being an unstoppable foe. He can master pretty much any skill he can observe. Some would say he's a taskmaster, which makes him a deadly opponent. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we were also introduced to Taskmaster, but the character was changed somewhat for the film in which they were introduced, Black Widow. Instead, Antonia Dreykov, the daughter of General Dreykov, the man behind the Red Room, was Taskmaster. When Black Widow left the Red Room and became an Avenger, she believed she had killed Dreykov, sadly also having to kill his daughter, who basically led them to their target. She was a casualty of the explosion, intended to kill Dreykov himself. Instead, Antonia was actually badly injured and ended up surviving, but her face was permanently scarred. She then became Dreykov's weapon, having studied the moves of the Avengers and having their fighting styles basically uploaded into her brain, allowing her to mimic all their various moves and making her a hard opponent for Black Widow to defeat. Quite different from the comic book version, but still really cool and badass as an alternate version of the character, I think. Number 1. Cyber. Cyber has come a long way when it comes to his look in the comics. Granted, Cyber has also come back a lot of times, so I guess it kinda makes sense that he would look different. He made his first appearance in Marvel Comics Presents in issue 85 in the 90s, where he was introduced to us as a cyborg-appearing Wolverine villain who was hired by General Koi, another enemy of Logan's. Back then, he was just a smile and a coat with a hat on. Currently, however, his design is much different, and he doesn't even go by the name Cyber anymore, instead being known as Hornet in the comics in his newest body.
So we're all familiar with Trapster, right? Peter Petruski, the incredibly intelligent chemist who fights with pretty much a high-powered glue gun, as well as other adhesives. Well, there's a mysterious woman taking on his moniker. Not much is known about this new Trapster, but she's actually the third person to take on this name. Cool thing about her is that she ditched the E in Trapster because who needs the E? It's 2022. It just looks cooler. This version of Trapster first appeared rudely interrupting a fight between Spider-Man and Vulture, and she robbed the winged villain of money he had just stolen. This may have seemed like a good thing, but she didn't give the money back. She's now a member of the all-female crime syndicate, the Sinister Syndicate, having been recruited by Beetle.
Number 9. Sin Eater. Sin Eater is Stanley Carter. While his costume may have remained somewhat the same, actually pretty much the same, his appearance more recently in the comics drastically changed after he was resurrected by Kindred, who were actually revealed to be the twins. The twins being Sarah and Gabriel Stacy, who in turn were revealed to be clones created from the genetic materials of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. So, not their naturally born offspring. Yay. Then, Sin Eater died, then was resurrected again. The second time Stanley was brought back after he'd taken his own life, he appeared in a zombie-like state, making him almost unrecognizable from his usual appearance, barring the fact that his costume has remained pretty much the same since his first appearance. Although, after rising from the grave the second time, his costume is pretty tattered, so I really think some people might have been like, who dis?
So, as we stated before, there is a new channel we have out now called Most Amazing Top 10 Anime, so if you're into that sort of thing, give us a follow and subscribe. We're putting out videos every day. This next master of the hunt is the ruthless son of Sergei Kravenov, simply known as Kraven the Hunter, the last son of Kraven. Sergei Kravenov, the original Kraven, wanted to carry on his legacy, so instead of having more children, because that would just take too long, plus he already has a daughter, he decided to create a whole lot of clones of himself, 87 to be exact, and attempted to train them in the ways of the hunt. Well, this current Kraven got his title by murdering all his brothers, which, hey, if you want to prove you're the apex predator, killing 87 clones of Kraven the Hunter is a great way to start your career, isn't it? He also saved the skulls and brought them before his proud dad. The son made his dad even more proud when he strangled his father to death while he was disguised as Spider-Man, thereby breaking his curse of immortality. The son has now taken on his father's moniker, Kraven the Hunter, as well as his actual name. Good job, buddy.
Number 7. Kane Parker. Kane Parker was initially a clone of Spider-Man who, yes, was considered to be, kinda evil. Chiefly because Kane didn't have any qualms with killing people, leaving them with his mark of Kane, which typically was used to kinda burn the face of his victims. And also because he had long hair and was more moody than Spider-Man, which is a feat because Spider-Man's a pretty moody dude. In reality, the mark of Kane was actually just Kane using his spider climbing little hooks on his hand, as we saw showcased visually in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, to burn his victims' faces. Kane was also seen as evil because he was mentally unstable, having been a defective clone who was rapidly deteriorating, which basically affected his mind. However, Kane is now known as Scarlet Spider and has a completely different look and attitude when compared to his original appearance and presentation in the comics. While still being, somewhat edgy because he's still Kane, he's definitely still more of a hero now in the comics than he ever was before.
The original Super Adaptoid, created by Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, was originally a villain facing off against Captain America, Iron Man, and of course the Avengers, Also going up against the X-Men, it was able to mimic and visually copy anything it wanted, giving it a hero's abilities and powers. But in Amazing Spider-Man 900, however, Spidey faces off against a different version of this shape-shifting entity known as the Sinister Six Adaptoid. This version of the character sports a brand new look, most prominently featuring Doc Ock's tentacles, but there are other visual elements in the character's design as well. The Sinister Six Adaptoid is an amalgamation of sorts of, you guessed it, the Sinister Six, having the abilities of Doc Ock, Vulture, Kraven, Mysterio, Sandman, and Electro. The Sinister Six had been captured by the Living Brain, and their powers and sentience combined to form the villain. So if you thought these guys were strong on their own, imagine going up against all of them at once. Spider-Man actually needed help the real Sinister Six in order to take this abomination down. Go figure. Also, I love when villains like team up with the hero just to because they both hate the same person. It's just fun.
Number 5. Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4. Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that basically all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that that version of Onslaught has like the black suit now, the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3. One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we later learned that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have like a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2. Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways. Whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1. The leader. I doubt after all this time if the leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the one below all, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns. Number 10. Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9. Raquel. Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated Tanault the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating Tanault so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled Empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be Tanault, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veranke, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Enel, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veranke? What? Not Veranke, two different people. Number 8. Kraven the Hunter. You might think you recognize Kraven, but do you really? After all, the current Kraven that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than Kraven's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of Kraven was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravenov, the Kraven himself. As such, this clone of Kraven was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of Kraven the Hunter. So while he may look like Kraven, albeit a younger version of him, this Kraven the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing, you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of Kraven made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as The Last Son. Number 7. Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6. Norman Osborn. Well, you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance. When it comes to his actions and his alignment, you might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemax. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot, and more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently.
Number 5. The Sinister Adaptoid. Okay, so the Super Adaptoid ain't no kind of new villain either, but an Adaptoid that takes on the abilities and likeness of all the members of the Sinister Six, that's certainly something new. In Amazing Spider-Man number 6 from 2022, which also happens to mark Amazing Spider-Man number 900 in legacy numbering, a second and improved version of the Living Brain emerges as the story's primary antagonist on Peter Parker's birthday. His main goal? Trying to find out who Spider-Man is. To that end, he kidnapped all of Spider-Man's most frequently deadly foes, the Sinister Six, and created a super adaptoid with them. It's like 25 feet tall, strong, fast, zappy, honor-obsessed, eight-legged, mysterious, and it likes to quote some of the Six's lines. Spider-Man ends up having to team up with the captured Six villains to fight the Adaptoid, but it's actually the villains' inability to properly work together that makes the Adaptoid malfunction and destroy itself. It's kind of funny how that works. As for the Living Brain, he ends up switching sides when Spider-Man refuses to let the Six destroy it, and saves the day before revealing it actually already knows Peter's real name. Kinda weird.
Number 4. Orchis. Orchis is the entire villainous organization that first appeared in House of X issue number 1, back when Dawn of X was just starting up and it was all fresh and new and we were like, ah, a new mutant thing and it's so good, and now we're like, please don't ever end, but it's probably gonna end soon, so I'll just go into the closet and cry forever. Don't worry about it. Orchis is an anti-mutant organization that is pro-human, and as such is all about the advancement of AI, such as Nimrod and Sentinels, to help protect humanity against the growing mutant threat. Like there's gonna be some people in the comments who are gonna say, actually, Nimrod is technically a Sentinel, and you're right, but also, don't worry about it. Orchis sees mutant evolution as a threat to humanity's existence, but little do they know, the AI they're creating is likely to serve as an even greater threat to humanity's existence in the future, based on everything that we've seen, and every alternate universe we've ever explored where that has continued. Many have joined Orchis since we were first introduced to them, with even a few mutants betraying their own kind to join their ranks.
Number 3. Uranos. Okay, technically this guy actually appeared in What If number 24 in September of 1980, but 1. He looks completely different, 2. He wasn't doing anything until now, and 3. He's cool, so I don't really care. Uranos the Undying is Thanos' grand uncle and one of the deadliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Uranos, like every Eternal, was created by the Celestials 1 million years ago, but he believed the Eternals best fulfilled their purpose if they exterminated both the deviants and the humans, all life outside the universe, and imprisoned the Celestials. Luckily, his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, plunging the Eternals into civil war. Now, he ultimately lost that war and was captured by his brothers and became the first Eternal to be imprisoned within the Exclusion, where he stayed for over 500,000 years because of the failsafe he imposed upon the machine. That failsafe being that if he dies, his greatest celestial designed weapons will be unleashed. Recently, mutants have been revealed to be related to deviants, making the X-Men enemies to the Eternals, and the Eternal Druid called on Uranos for help in Axe Judgment Day #1. And to show how powerful he is, in a matter of 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion, along with a bunch of other very powerful mutants. He's scary.
Number 2, Annihilation. Annihilation was at first a mysterious villain who appeared in the X-Books. Eventually, however, we learned that Annihilation was actually a demonic and possessive force which had taken over Genesis, who was forced to take up the Golden Helm of Annihilation after defeating the villain. It was basically a losing battle either way, as if Genesis lost, she would have died, but in winning, she was forced to take up the helm and then lead the demonic forces of Amenth, which had so long plagued Arakko and its people. So it's like a if you win, you lose, and if you lose, you lose. Genesis turned out as well to be the long-lost wife of Apocalypse. Apocalypse had left his wife, children, and people eons ago in an attempt to help saving Arakko from the Amenthi forces that threatened to one day overtake it. In the end, Apocalypse, with the assistance of Saturnine, helped to free Genesis from the hold of Annihilation, and the helm was turned into a staff that was less influential on its host and more easily used as a tool instead of, possessing the will of whomever possessed it. Annihilation had their first appearance in X-Men issue #12 from 2020.
Number 1. Monolith. This likely villain is so new it was hard to even find information about her. First appearing in July of 2022, which is last month unless you're in the future, in Hulk #9, Monolith is the very strong, big pink queen of Hulk Planet. Hulk Planet is set to be the title of the new Hulk story arc taking place after Hulk's whole Titan Hulk thing and the fight with Thor that just took place. The planet itself is situated right next to a gamma-emitting star, so if you haven't guessed yet, Hulk Planet is indeed a planet covered in Hulks. Banner, piloting the Starship Hulk, finds the Hulk planet while on a mission for isolation. Instead, he meets Monolith, who offers him a place among the other Gamma beings where Hulk can exist in peace. But of course, there seems to be more to Monolith than meets the eye, and we kind of just have to wait until we can find out more information. It is likely safe to assume that as the leader of a planet of Gamma mutates, Monolith is very strong and very powerful. Will Hulk find peace? That's not usually how it goes, but only time will tell.